Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to our forum to discuss the new potential contract changes that we are asking our membership to ratify. And most of you, just so you know, as a point of reference, will be receiving your ballot probably sometime today, if not this weekend. And so we're hoping that this is the very last mail ballot that we will have to do, and that we'll be moving to electronic ballot. Some of you may or may not know that the National Labor Relations Board has very strict rules about what we do, and we need to take time this summer to evaluate what company to go with for an electronic ballot. So if you, for some reason, don't have your ballot, I would say by Tuesday, let us know and we can get another one in the mail, or you could drop by our union offices in Midtown and fill out your ballot in there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and let me just go ahead and start sharing my screen here real quickly. Either Bill or Grace, since you're in my screen, can you give me a thumbs up if you're able to see my the main screen? Thank you. All right. So I want to start by first saying thank you to our negotiating team this year. We use both the negotiation team as well as researchers and content experts. But for the last 8 to 9 weeks, this group of folks here on the screen spent considerable time debating, at times insisting, passionately fighting to make sure we got the best contract possible for folks. I also want to thank our team of our research teams and content experts who helped us in very specific areas. And here I listed it by the areas where people were able to provide input and information for us. In particular, I also want to thank Chris Clark over at FLC and Sandra Guzman from Sacramento City College, who had to pinch hit during negotiations for us so that we made sure we had extra counselors in the room during that negotiations. So let's start with money. I think that's always a good place to start for the most part. One of the things I want to remind folks of is that for our unit, for faculty, and here at Los Rios, we use what's called a bucket system. And so we have a guaranteed proportion of money that comes in. It's about 60, so we divide it into 80 and 20. 20% goes to overhead costs, the admin, et cetera. 80% goes into the collective bargaining groups. So that's us, the LRCEA, the supervisors associations, the managers associations, all of us come out of that 80% side. And out of that side, we as faculty get a little over 61% of those dollars. And so it's also important to note for COLA and retro, we negotiate that every summer. So right around July. So I would tell you that right now, what we're hearing from the state, and that doesn't mean the number is going to stick, is that the COLA from the state is hovering around 8%. We will have to wait through the May revise and the signing of the governor's budget to know what the final number is. But we will expect a communication from us during the summer to understand what the COLA is and how it's being applied to salary schedules. And the retro is money we're owed from this current year that we're in. And so that's a separate pot of dollars that are the unused dollars from this academic year that are owed to us. And so we will also negotiate that right around July as well. And so I would actually expect you're probably going to get one email that discusses the cost of living increase for the 23-24 year, as well as the retro for 22-23. Aside from that, and using dollars, the ongoing dollars that we still had remaining in our bucket, one of the remaining things that we had, when we restructured our salary schedule, we wanted to increase more steps, we wanted to improve pay, but we also know that a number of folks who are at the top of the schedule, particularly closer to retirement, many of you voted against your own financial interests because the change in the way we allocated things were different. So a part of our group's commitment was to make sure that we started addressing that. So one of the things that we negotiated off the top was an additional $250 between steps. So if you're currently on the 164 schedule and on step 25, you're going to see an additional $2,500. And so everything gets sort of pushed up. And so we only have rough numbers for that yet, so we didn't want to project a scale. But I think all of your college presidents and reps, if you have a particular reference point you need, you can probably ask them. But part of this was for us, was to be able to make sure that we started addressing the top of the salary schedule, which if you look closely, there's only between steps 16 and 17 and 17 and 18, et cetera. There's only about 600, I think there's $620 between steps. So now it'll be $870 between steps. So that is one of the first money items that we negotiated to start addressing that particular issue. I forgot to note that you can feel free to go ahead and use the chat. We have Jason Newman and Michael Henderson. And for those of y'all who don't know Michael Henderson, he's our new executive director. They are working the chat and folks can answer questions that are in the chat that I might be going through. One of the things that we also worked on in terms of salaries was the initial salary placement of full-time faculty, which basically doesn't affect anyone in this room because we've already been placed a long time ago. Or in the last few years, but we felt it was really important to make sure that we did something to honor the work that folks did coming through the door. We know that there was an artificial cap on part-time work that limited to 3 years. We moved that up to 8. We also wanted to make sure that we honored occupational experience. This was especially important for our CTE areas and nursing. Where people had a lot of years of work in industry that were not being counted, especially the part-time work in industry. So these changes will impact the initial placement. Our hope is to continue working on doing some similar placement work on the part-time side as well. So I am just going to short shrift this chair compensation piece because we have a whole forum dedicated to this at 12:30 today that will also be recorded, being led by James Tells and Katie Carberry. But for any of you who have been chairs or are currently chairs and ever looked at the current Appendix G, you know that it's a hot mess, to put it bluntly. And that we also know from our chairs compensation survey that, or from chairs survey, is that the #1 ask of all chairs was we need more time. We have all these different obligations being handed to us, things that we're expected to do. And if we don't do it, it impacts our department. We need time. And so one of the important things I want to talk about is that we will have a new Appendix G and that and a new department chair compensation form. But the most important thing to know about this is that we are moving to a completely reassigned time system, meaning with the first, which basically is initially determined by the average FTE in your department for the fall and spring. And then if you have additional duties that increase the number of expected hours, you would work with your dean to discuss, does this impact your average number of hours a week? And we could add additional reassigned time if needed. So for example, I would tell you that the initial FTE of someone who's like an MET or any of the CTE programs may come in with like maybe a 2 or 3 FTE. However, you may also be managing strong workforce grants and a few others that add a lot of extra reporting, curriculum work, et cetera, that absolutely impacts the number of hours you have to spend a week. And so that would be part of your discussion with your dean. We are moving away from, we moved away from stipends. When it comes to this, we believe that if you still want to teach and make extra money, what you can do is take the classes that you would normally have taught in load and move it into your overload. And by moving it into overload, you would be on your adjunct rate, but also you could have the opportunity to also bank it for type C leave, which we'll do a whole other workshop on type C leave. But for those of you who are full-timers, you can basically, if you're in a department like mine where you teach 3-unit classes, if you bank about 7 overload classes, you could have a semester off. We also integrated, and because this is associated with the reassigned time, new language around responsibilities and duties. One thing that we want to note here is that although when you end up looking at this section, You're going to say, why did you add so much? What we actually did was integrate what was the chair feedback form into contract language to make sure that there was official acknowledgement of the work that you did. And then there will be there's a timeline. There's a lot of about how we would implement the department chair timeline. It obviously will be adjusted, and a lot of things will be happening this summer for all of our chairs. This is just gives you a quick look at the FTE breakdown, the average FTE per week breakdown. So if you have less than 5 FTE in your department, you would get about 0.1 FTE per semester. That's basically an anticipated average about 3.5 hours a week. You can, let's say, because obviously 0.1 is not enough to buy out a class. You can do what we call load balancing, meaning you can combine your fall and spring so that you can take at least one course release a year. But you'll see the breakdown there. And again, I'm not going to go too deep into this because Katie and James will be talking about this later. They've lived with this with reconfiguring this compensation system for the last 10 weeks. So I'm going to let the people who are the pros at this do the longer explanation later. And if you can't make that meeting, we will record it, and we'll have the recording up by Monday. So I'm going to go right into some of the part-time faculty changes. And I'm going to get through this section and then I'll pause and see if there's some questions. For part-time faculty, in terms of contract changes, all adjunct faculty are eligible for 2-year Los Rios parking passes. Ironically, it was actually only preferenced in full-time faculty that could have 2-year parking passes. But that's sort of the least of the things that we've negotiated, but we haven't one of the things that we've heard loud and clear from our faculty, our part-time faculty, is wanting to make sure we had opportunities for more college service and professional development. We will be expanding the paid college service and professional development opportunities for adjunct faculty. The payment will be at class and step. So one of the things that our team has focused on was making sure that when part-time faculty are paid from everything from service or professional development or office hours, is to really try to work towards an equitable system and part-time equity. And so our goal is to really be at class and step. So we are still working out what that list looks like. We also want to make sure we have additions from our Senate partners to make sure that we capture some of the different parts of service that they had encouraged us to lobby for. The District Academic Senate last semester, might have been last spring, passed a resolution asking us to expand service for part-time faculty. We also got rid of the pilot language, which had been there for 6 years, to have 0.6 preference, a permanent subcategory of the second level preference, which basically means that you could have a 0.6 assignment as part of your preference load. Adjunct faculty undergoing performance review will be allowed a peremptory challenge to remove a member of the review team. And so this has been something that we know that part-time faculty have been asking for over a decade. And it will work the same way it does with full-time faculty. You would communicate to your Senate president that you would like to remove an individual from your committee. It cannot be your area dean, but it can be the faculty member. You do not need to give a reason, but it will need to be done, I believe, by I believe it's the 4th week of the semester. Am I wrong, Michael?
End of week 2, I believe, Belinda.
End of week 2. So, but it will be in the calendar, and we'll make sure we communicate it. Historically, adjunct faculty had not given feedback on the department chair feedback form. Preference adjunct faculty can now give feedback. Other changes for part-timers is also we moved office hours such that they will be paid at your class and step on the B2 schedule. Unfortunately, at this point in time, moving it to B1, which is our ultimate goal, was cost prohibitive, but it is still on our radar to eventually want to move there. But we have office hours paid at class and step on the B2 schedule. Adjunct faculty are permitted to hold all of their office hours online. Actually, and that's just language that integrates what was already on the adjunct office hour form. And then also online office hours must be provided in the syllabus, must be time and date specific. And that faculty must offer students the opportunity to use a video conferencing system such as Zoom, but you can also offer other communications formats. I want to highlight that this is going to be an expectation of all faculty doing online office hours, full-timers as well. So you'll have to have some sort of Zoom link. It doesn't necessarily have to be on. Some people opt to do that and other people use other things, but you will always have to have a Zoom link available for your students if they want to video conference you during office hours. Finally, and this is the one I would tell you that we gave to the district. It's important to note that preference adjunct faculty who receive a written reprimand for substantiated misconduct as a result of a misconduct investigation will lose their preference and be considered new adjunct faculty for the purposes of assignment. So essentially, you will have due process associated with Article 27 of our contract. This can be misconduct related to discrimination, unprofessional behavior towards a student, things that don't rise to the level of moral turpitude, which would subject you to immediate firing by the college. So this is one thing that we do want to note as a change, and you will always have the right to representation by the union. And this is a year-to-year pilot, meaning if we believe that the system is being abused by the administration, we have the right to withdraw it from our collective bargaining agreement. Are there any questions up to this point or things that I should answer that are in the chat?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So it says $250 added to each step between 16 to 25. Does that mean that the 25 goes up $250 as well?
So it's between, and so it should be at the end. And Bill, I'd have to go look for my number.
Belinda, I actually put something in the chat there. So basically, based on current numbers, step 16 will increase by $250, but because the distance between 16 and 17 also increases by $250, what we see is an increase of $250 at step 16, $500 at 17, $750 at 18, and so on upwards. Someone at step 25 will see a $2,500 increase. That's on the A164 schedule. And people on the 174 will increase a little bit more proportionately. But yes, so if you're it's not just $250 at each level. It's an increase of $250 between the levels, which means that each level goes up proportionally. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you very much. That's great.
Thanks for the question, Bill. Are there any other questions in the chat that I should answer verbally or otherwise? Are we good? Looks like we can go. I'll go ahead and move on, and I'll leave time at the end to get through other things. I'm going to talk about counselors now. There was a lot of talk in this group, and unfortunately not as many changes as we would have liked relative to counselors. We will be doing a counselor specific session on next Wednesday at 2 o'clock, but to do some an overview as part of counselor college service during peak weeks that occurred before semester began. Counselors would have 0 college service. They are now allowed 1 hour per week during the peak times. I think the bigger pieces of college service that we thought were really important to fight for was a counselor presence on shared governance committees, and all the sort of committee work that goes on during Flex Week is their presence is incredibly important and needed. And so counselors may now participate in academic senate retreats, committees, and subcommittees as identified in the district's regulation 3412. So this includes things like curriculum committee, diversity, equity, student success committee, even if it exceeds the 1 hour of college service during the peak week. The dean can also approve counselor participation in other committees during peak time without reducing service. And for some of the, and I don't know if some of you in this room knew this, but at some of our campuses, counselors were not able to attend convocation, but all counselors may now attend up to 3 hours of the Friday convocation during peak week. This counselor schedule change just basically puts into contract language of what I believe is existing process at most campuses, is that after you've set your 174-day schedule, and it's been approved for the new academic year, the area dean may change at the request of either party the approved 174-day schedule to accommodate emergent work-related needs of administration or counselor. provided there's enough time in the contracted year. I don't know if folks know this, but counselors actually have to schedule their whole schedule for the year in advance in one fell swoop. So I think most of us know, if you're like me, I don't know what I'm doing next Tuesday, let alone a year in advance, but schedule changes are actually incredibly important. I'm going to get to the council remote work in this next section. So I think one of the things we want to talk about in terms of remote work is we had to talk about making sure we had some common definitions. So remote work for faculty members means that refers to faculty members performing their professional responsibilities. And for us, regardless of what category, it's all listed in Article 8, in a location other than their campus of assignment or any other Los Rios facility. So it can be your home, it can be the coffee shop, wherever it is that you are working that is not your Los Rios office. Online refers to the modality in which faculty provide instruction, services, or resources to students. For some of us, like myself, who are classroom faculty like myself, online or remote are the same thing. For those in student services, library, nursing, etc., remote and online are two separate things. And so I want to note that on the front end. And this is the incredibly important thing to remember, that anything we've negotiated around remote work is simply eligibility. Eligibility is not a guarantee of assignment. It is an up to amount. And there's no amount of remote assignment that is guaranteed in any given semester. So a dean may one semester say you're eligible, that they're willing to assign you to 0.6 remote, and the next semester it may be 0. There's absolutely no guarantees. So I'm going to just talk about the online office hours first. Online office hours, as I noted earlier, must be provided on the syllabus, time and day specific. Faculty who are doing online office hours must also offer students the opportunity to use a video conferencing system. So you should have a Zoom link on your syllabus or in Canvas. But you can also offer other communication formats. So for example, I know some of our folks may use Discord or other chat messaging systems, but if the student needs to be able to either see you or see the material you're talking about, you are expected to be able to provide a Zoom link and be able to communicate with them that way. I also want to note that email has been taken out as a legitimate online office hour. So part of this is to remember is that this is synchronous and you are expected, you can email obviously while you're in office hour, but you also have these other formats. All full-time faculty, regardless of instruction modalities, may choose to hold up to 2 online or remote office hours per week per semester. So if you're teaching all 5 of your classes or all of your classes on ground, you can still have 2 online office hours. And I'm going to make note of this next one. Faculty teaching online or hybrid courses may hold 1 online office hour remotely for each 0.2 FTE of online or hybrid instruction, up to a maximum of 4 remote online office hours per week per semester. So if you end up with 100% online assignment, you only get 4 of your 5 office hours online. Effectively, this is a residency requirement, and I'm just going to be straight up about it, is that you will, as a full-time faculty member, are going to be expected to do 1 office hour per week on ground in your office. So rather than implementing a residency requirement, this is what we have in place. We are already aware that there is already something similar in place this semester. And we also know that some faculty have been either disciplined or asked or taken pay deductions for this. How they plan to enforce this will be entirely up to the administration. But the union has no recourse on this if you're missing your office hours. So I just want to say that outright. It is not our job to enforce this particular thing, but if it's policed, you need to know that you're expected to be in your office. So in terms of remote work, this is the new negotiated eligibility. Tenure track, long-term, temporary, and adjunct faculty are eligible to teach up to 100% of their load remotely and online. Counselors, tenure track, long-term temp, and adjunct counseling faculty are eligible to receive 0.4 of remote assignment in any given scheduling period, by approval of their dean. Actually, all this is by approval of your dean. All counselors who are currently enrolled in or have completed the online counselor training CVC OEI online counselor college counselor course, which I believe is the 40-hour course, are eligible for up to 0.6 FTE. And again, I want to note that right now, at least through September 1st, we're hoping it will get extended, that full-time counselors can be paid to take that class using what's remaining of our higher education relief fund dollars. We will work on making sure we resend out those links to all counselors as well. Remote work for coordinators, librarians, and nurses, tenure track, long-term temp, and adjunct coordinators, nurses, and librarians are eligible up to 0.6 FTE of remote assignment, or 0.8 if both parties agree in any scheduling period with the approval of the area dean. I think what's important to note is that there's a few things in this category. Nurses are disproportionately linked to the campus clinics, and parts of their jobs may not be able to move remote, so they may be looking at lesser assignment. The category of coordinators is actually a huge basket that includes a lot of different things. Coaches are labeled as athletic coordinators, and so they have a lot of on-ground expectations, but the other end of it is we may have DE coordinators. So there lies the sort of variability. And then all of these categories understand that that assignment of remote work may look different in any given semester. Eligibility is not a guarantee. And that what we call quality control is how it gets listed in the contract, is done by our peer review process. So hypothetically, if you get dinged on your performance review as not being good online, it may impact how much they assign you in the remote modality. All of those things I think are important to note on the front end. Before I get to this next performance reviews session, are there any questions about remote work or online assignment?
Yeah, there are in the chat.
You want to just go ahead and read off anything I should add?
Yeah, so question, we're currently scheduling full-time faculty for spring 2024. Is this contract ratified as of today, or should we focus on the 0.6 max for online for now?
I would use the 0.6 max for right now, because anything if we ratify on I think we're counting votes on May 17th, so the day before graduation, it still has to go through Board of Trustee approval. So I should also note that counselors, both with counselors and coordinators, librarians, and nurses, they're probably going to determine remote work by semester. So they may schedule you first and then ask you for your remote option second. Unlike classroom faculty, where you have to make the decision as you're making the decision about the class.
Yeah, there's also a question, Belinda, for the coordinators, librarians, and nurses. It says up to 0.6 FTE with approval of area dean, but it also says 0.8 FTE by mutual agreement. So can someone clarify this? And basically the answer is yes, you are right. Those things are pretty much the same thing. One thing that we tried to push in when we were asking for remote eligibility in the negotiations, our position with the district was that it is only eligibility anyway. So, the dean is still the person who gets to make the assignment. So, Hillary, you're right. Basically, if the dean agrees you can have 0.6, you can have 0.6. If the dean agrees you can have 0.8, you can have 0.8 if you want it. I would say in terms of the contract language itself, one difference here is that theoretically, if the dean assigns you to 0.8 online and you only wanted 0.6, you could insist that last 0.2 be on ground, because it does have to be by mutual agreement. So that I don't know how many people are going to refuse online assignments, but theoretically, at least, that could be the case.
Yeah, and quite honestly, our goal there was to try to get as much remote work eligibility as possible for this category. I think if anything, you've already read the language that's on some of the contract changes, and we'll send the contract, the strikeout version of our contract we expect to have by next Tuesday, if not sooner. You're going to see that, in particular, the counseling section of remote work, and you can already see it in the document I sent you, was hyper restrictive for, I'm not even going to the why, but they, at the last minute, for whatever reason, with coordinators, librarians, and nurses, they almost didn't want to negotiate with us. And so when we were negotiating hard and saying we weren't going to go back to our membership without an agreement for remote work for everybody, the goal of our small team there was to make sure we push that limit as high as possible. And we intend to want to do that with counselors as well, but it all has to happen in stages. So even though we knew that the adding in 0.8 by mutual agreement was going to look a little funny in contract, what our union's goal was as much eligibility for this category as possible. And so that's how we got it.
And there's also a question here, Alex, and from Alex, and this goes to, I think, what Belinda was saying. Alex asked, why did we negotiate 100%? What was the demand from the faculty? I'm looking at the faculty survey right now, and just about half of faculty wanted at least the eligibility to teach 100% online. And to be honest, our goal here really was flexibility, both for faculty and really for the district, right? The idea is that maybe these things fluctuate as time goes on. I don't know, Belinda, does that reflect your understanding of what we were going for?
Absolutely. And yeah, so we did in fact look at our survey as much as possible. And this is the 100% eligibility was definitely this. It changed. Like that's something that has been an attitude change pre and post pandemic for our full-time faculty. In our last negotiation, folks didn't want us to negotiate 100% remote work. And now this time it was pretty clear. So, and again, eligibility is not a guarantee. And quite honestly, looking at enrollment numbers across the district and what they're doing with classes, there's only probably a handful of different divisions / departments that actually need this. And I would say, so for business CIS at all 4 campuses has a huge demand and have wanted this for years. We have our 100% online only programs. I think there's 13 programs across the district, but others may actually not realize a full 100% remote assignment. So any other questions that I missed here? Let's see if is
Yes,
there.
there's a question about the video conferencing. So does it have to be for all office hours or just online office hours?
Just online office hours.
Sorry, I missed that one. And I've just answered Ada's question about adjuncts and office hours. No, there's no residency requirement in general. The single on-ground office hour has become a sort of, as Belinda said, a sort of a de facto residency requirement. But adjuncts, if you're an adjunct and you get a fully online assignment, you can also hold all of your office hours online. And
the difference for adjunct is that office hours for adjuncts is an opt-in program. So it's voluntary. For full-time faculty, it is part of our salaried work and responsibilities. So hypothetically, if they were trying to force you, not that they can't force you to do on ground, but if as a part-timer, you don't have that same caveat of 1 hour on ground, but basically that 1 hour of on-ground office hours for full-time faculty, as we've noted, is a de facto residency requirement, meaning that you have to be here.
Yeah, and Belinda, there's another question here. I teach in-person classes off campus. Can my office hour be at the location the class is being held, which is where the students will be, or does it have to happen on campus?
I'm assuming it's a Los Rios facility, and so if it is, then I would say yes. Or if you're at one of our partner sites, if you're like in a community studies type of program, I think that I think that would be reasonable, but I would just communicate it to your dean that it makes more sense.
And one more question. If I have an online class, do I have to have an online office hour, or can all my office hours be in person? I think you would have to offer the online office hour at least to the people in your online classes. I think the district's going to argue it would be unreasonable to expect a student who has signed up for an online office hour, an online class, to come to campus in order to meet with their professor. Of course, you could hold that office hour. You could actually communicate with that student remotely from your office on campus if you wanted to do that. Does that sound right, Belinda?
I would say by contract, though, I actually think by contract, you could have all your office hours in person.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Whether or not that is the best choice relative to student success is a whole other thing, is what I would tell you. and that, hopefully, the decisions we make are around what best meets the needs of our students. Because at least my understanding of the research is that students who are in online classes tend to plug into online services, office hours, et cetera, at higher rates. But per contract, I think you could do all of them on ground. So I'm going to move on to performance review. Counselors and librarians teaching classes in overload will have performance review teams that include a faculty member from the discipline or related discipline of the course they're teaching in. This was actually something very specific to our HCD classes and our library science classes, is because the way it was written, they could have someone from a whole other discipline, evaluating them. So this was clarifying language for us. We also added clarifications of the mandatory performance review for spring full-time hires by education code. All new employees have to be reviewed. All new faculty have to be reviewed. But it also, for spring hires, your tenure clock has not officially started. So we added clarifying language there. The equity reflection pilot language was removed. So what this means is you still have to write an equity reflection. However, as it's currently written in our contract, it is not an official, you turn it in while you're under performance review, and it may be part of your post review conference, just discussions, but it is not included as a formal part of your review in which you're ranked on a satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory rate. So we just removed the pilot language, but everything else remains the same about the equity reflection. This is probably the biggest change for classroom faculty in terms of performance review. All student reviews will now default to online reviews. It will be administered via Canvas to your students. And this is for all classes. Faculty teaching on-ground or hybrid courses may elect to have on-ground reviews. If you opt for an on-ground review, you must inform the dean by the end of the second week of the semester. We have asked, they will, as part of our negotiations, it will be part of the pre-semester communication that goes out to you about your performance review. And in practice, you are going to want to make sure that if you want those reviews to happen in your classroom, the old school way with paper and pen, that it will that it will occur right on ground, and you need to communicate that directly. We know that this is especially important for ESL classes and in other spaces and places. Online student reviews will occur in weeks 6 for 8-week 1 classes, week 12 for 16-week classes, and week 4 for 8-week 2 classes. For the 16-week classes, faculty can move the reviews anytime between the 6th and 12th week. For example, for me, I've always ended up with my reviews happening during a midterm. We all know that having reviews done during midterms is not optimal, but this will be the default. We also just so you know, even though if you're getting an online review, or that's being distributed through Canvas for an on-ground class, it will use the on-ground form. I feel like there might be some questions popping up in the chat. Am I wrong?
No, I think I'm keeping up right now. So. Okay.
So also you'll find in the strikeout contract, and I note this in the written report, the same rules apply, that it must be deleted right after a certain number of weeks unless you're in a discipline process, etc. So a couple other things most folks already know. In the last contract, we had the mandatory use of the learning management system, which for us currently is Canvas. 5 years ago, it was Blackboard. But you now must use the LMS gradebook consistent with the grading procedure outlined in your syllabus and ensuring compliance with 8418. So I want to make a couple notes here. Basically, this is mandatory use of the gradebook. But we were also deliberately vague in this language in that it doesn't necessarily a timing. For some of us, I use my grade book for everything. For others, they may do an ungrading process. So the only grade you may put up there is the final grade at the end. But the idea here was that according to administration, they've had trouble making sure that when there's emergencies, getting grades, students want to make sure they have an understanding of what their ongoing grade is, etc. But use of the LMS gradebook is now expected. But again, how you use it, just make sure that you outline it in your syllabus. We also made some clarifications to type and A/B leave. A lot of you, and any of you who read, for example, some of the Appendix G with the chairs, or any other parts of our stipends. We used to use words like annualized all the time, and it was creating confusion. So just so you know, type A leave is 1 semester at full pay or 1 year at half pay. Type B is leave at full pay of up to 100% reassigned time for up to 1 year in duration. So this is just clarifying language. Any questions there? I think we're okay. So as most of you know, we had quite a few changes to leaves. We redefined immediate family, and there's an exhaustive list in the document that was emailed to you. I think one of the major changes, and this was legislated, that's important to note, is that you can have a designated person, which is a change, and but you can only designate that one person for the year. And so the designated person will be identified at the time the leave is requested. So again, for some of us, we have our biological families. For others, we have people who we consider family by choice. This, under the immediate family clause, honors that. We've also redefined sick leave to include mental health, mental illness, and physical illness of the employee. For us, we were aware that in the Black Staff and Faculty Association memos in 2020 and 2022, that there had been direct call outs to make sure that we had the ability to address the mental health needs of individuals. And so we asked for an expansion of our existing, the ability to use our existing sick time for reasons related to mental health. We also expanded parental leave. And again, this is there's a lot of things within leaves that are pilots, because we need to make sure that we are assessing the fiscal viability. Because again, as we noted at the beginning of this presentation, we use a bucket system. And our leaves are structured in such a way that we created a pot of money using one-time dollars, and then also are adding about $250,000 a year of ongoing, that we need to assess whether fiscally we can sustain what we've negotiated here. And if not, and we're going to be assessing on a year-to-year basis the fiscal viability. And this actually isn't the parental leave isn't the one we're worried about. I'll get to the one we're worried about a little later about financial viability. But expanded parental leave. An employee will be granted 8 consecutive weeks of paid parental leave. A week means 7 consecutive 24-hour periods. The leave is not deducted from any other leave category, and is limited to 1 use per fiscal year. This number stays the same whether you have a single child or twins, triplets, etc. It's 8 weeks. Let's see. Additionally, you can use up to 2 weeks of accumulated sick leave for parental leaves. This runs concurrently with the California Family Rights Act. So this is what folks were using most of the time when they were using parental leave already. So basically, you get your 8 weeks first, and then the 12 weeks kicks in. Our goal here was to, if possible, make sure that folks had a semester off or close to a semester off if they opted to use the 8 weeks and then the 12 weeks of that runs off of your sick time. Critical illness leave. This is also a pilot. All regular, adjunct, and overload faculty shall be granted 7 work days per year of salary entitlement in the case of critical illness or accident of a member of the immediate family. And so work days here are days that you are scheduled to work. And so critical illness, you're entitled to 7 days. And again, this is a pilot program, and this is open to all faculty. Bereavement leave, we eliminated the pilot language and makes permanent the salary entitlement for bereavement leave, which I believe is 3 days for anyone who is within 250 miles or less of the district office.
300.
300.
Yep.
And then if you're over 300, it's 5 days. So are there some questions I should be answering before I move on to catastrophic leave?
No, there was just one about visiting the LMS course, and I just pointed out the vagueness of this works in our favor. Make sure that people visit it at least once to familiarize themselves with the course. Anything beyond that is up to you. You can check Canvas stats or require each student to make an introductory post, but apart from that, and I noted that this was already current contract language too.
Correct. Some of us quiz, or sometimes some of us just cover it in class. So
Right, and we have another question now. What impact is there on salary advancement and retirement for taking the 8 weeks parental leave and or 12 weeks sick leave for parental leave?
Well, the 12 weeks comes out of your sick time, and normally at the point at which you retire, if you use your sick time, you wouldn't get paid out for that time. The 8 week should not impact either, at least from my.
Right, and because these are paid leaves, they should not impact your advancement. Just be aware that one thing that has not changed in the contract, at least at the moment, we're talking about discussing this in the steering committee with the college, is that if you take more than 3 days of unpaid leave in a year, that can actually impact your advancement on the salary step schedule. But these are paid leaves, so that does not apply to that.
And CalSTRS and PERS also have their own rules about unpaid leave as well, but these are all paid leaves.
Right.
So we also have paid employee and immediate family catastrophic leave program. This is also a pilot that we'll be assessing every year. Full-time, and this is only for full-time faculty. Full-time faculty are eligible to apply to the catastrophic leave program. For the employee, the program extends the leave for faculty who exhausted all sick leave benefits, including the 5-month law, are unable to return to work. So full-time faculty who are on full or partial leave and exhausted all their sick leave can apply to receive a 50% supplement above partial earnings. This salary and medical benefit will be for a period of no longer than 4 weeks. And this, as defined earlier, it's consecutive, a week is 7 consecutive days. Essentially, this is about a month. In addition, you can also apply to use the catastrophic leave for immediate family, which extends the leave for faculty in the case of critical illness or accident of a member of the immediate family. And you've exhausted your personal necessity leave, your critical illness leave, and personal business leave, which adds up to 15 days in total. So in this particular case, it does not touch your sick time, because sick time is defined as time that you use for yourself as the employee. And have partial or full leave and can qualify for up to an additional 50% salary supplement above the partial earnings for a period of no longer than 4 weeks. Again, 4 consecutive weeks. So,
Belinda?
Yeah.
Sorry, a question in the chat. And to confirm, parental leave can be used at any time within the first year of birth, adoption, fostering. The answer to that is yes. And can be used before, such as a few days before birth. The answer to that, I understand, is no, because we have defined the start of parental leave as the date of birth or the date of adoption or placement. That's correct, isn't it?
Correct, that's my understanding. But we can seek clarification on that regardless. So
yeah, we'll seek. I'm pretty sure that you would have to use sick leave or some other form of leave in the period before the arrival of the child, whatever form that arrival took, because the definition says that. In fact, I'm looking at the language now. It says the parental leave effective date is the date of birth of a child, the date of legal adoption or adoption placement date.
And I think it's also personal necessity. I think you might be able to use personal necessity leave if you need to take a couple of days off before that.
Right.
Sarah's hand is raised.
Which Sarah, Smith or Lehman?
Smith, sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah. Smith.
Hi, everyone. So I came into this forum actually thinking I had a slightly better grasp on these leaves than I do. So I've been active in the campaign for family workplace justice, and we're really thankful for the progress that's been made on leaves. I think especially around parental leave, this means that we probably have the best parental leave in the entire state of California when we compare our benefit to other community college districts. And I'm happy, I'm somewhat happy with this caregiving leave that we got to care for our family members, but I didn't understand that this isn't extended to part-time faculty. And so that's very concerning to me. And I'm wondering, I know in the chat, somebody said, well, I have 2 concerns, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to them. The first concern is that this caregiving leave, which is now a part of catastrophic leave, is not extended to part-time family. We've been arguing all along that we need to prioritize the needs of part-time family in our campaign, or part-time faculty in our campaign. So this is a really big concern. And then, so that's question number 1. And then most people need to start their parental leave prior to the day that they give birth. So I'm just wondering if you're absolutely sure that that's the interpretation of this benefit, because, you know, and if you are sure, then can we slice up the way that we use our sick leave, right? Can we start to use some of our sick leave prior to giving birth, and then use more after we've used the 8 weeks. I've just never heard of this thing where you can't take parental leave until the day that you give birth, because people are, physically, but it's very, very difficult for people to sort of continue to work while they're that pregnant.
So I think that on the second question first, right, is the idea, I think on that one is that you could use your sick leave, but we also have some of the other leaves, personal necessity, et cetera, that can be used prior to that. Right, but we will of course double check the read, but we're pretty sure that it is based off of placement dates in terms of how it got negotiated. Regarding catastrophic leave, it isn't that we didn't ask for extensions of part-timers, but in the end, I think there was a few different things that came up, and I could also ask Michael and Jason if they want to add in here. Part of it was both expense. It was also about that some of these other leaves are not, again, I think expense was really the sort of the big piece of that part of it. Jason or Michael, do you want to add in on that for me?
Yes, I think that's right. The district was, even though this money is coming out of sort of our bucket, so to speak, the money that the union gets to have a considerable amount of discretion over distributing, the district pushed back very hard. I was in some of the leave meetings, but not all. I think Jason was there for more of them, and he can maybe talk a bit more about what the district was actually saying there about part-timers and leave.
Because the new leave system, the cost moving forward for the first year is so uncertain, the decision was made to not include part-timers in this round of the leave negotiation process.
It's interesting, and I see Sarah Lehman has her hand up, but I don't know if I could support a caregiving leave that prioritizes full-timers. I'm a full-timer myself, and I don't know. I would rather have seen part-timers be prioritized here, given that part-timers are more exploited in our system. But
yeah, so this is the best that we could come up with in these negotiations, right? And so it's not that we don't believe that part-timers shouldn't have this, but and even though we have some discretion over our monies, there are ways in which, in different ways, places and spaces, obviously, that the administration is going to exert, whether it's fiscal controls or controls over time. You see elements of that relative to the counseling contract for remote work. So for us, like anything else, this is something that, again, we are absolutely we in general are concerned about some of the fiscal elements of this, but this was really the best work that we can do in this group, and at least for right now, this particular leave is relative to the catastrophic leave program is only relative to full-timers. But the critical illness leave and getting 7 days there, that's inclusive of all faculty, was part of the move towards being also trying to make sure we also include part-timers where we could.
Thank you for your answer, and I don't want to take up too much time. I do appreciate all of the late work that you put into this, and we've been working on this for years, and I think by with these victories, it makes clear that our union heard us and heard and read the stories of faculty about how necessary it is to win better leaves. So I think that's really important to say, even though I have this concern about these leaves not being extended to, at least this particular leave not being extended to part-time faculty.
Great. And I think Sarah Lehman, did you have your hand up somewhere?
Oh yeah, just to answer, and thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Belinda. Just to answer your second question, Sarah, about whether you can split up your sick time to take some time before the baby is born. Yes, you can. And people have been saying this in the chat. We already have the ability to do that. It's like you work with your doctor they determine when you're going to be, they call it disabled. But then from that point on, you can start using your sick leave.
Great. I see James, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. So I wasn't on this particular team, but I can just say in general that because a number of the items we don't know, there was no way to know what the fiscal implications were, that on those items we were going to look at them annually to see what transpires. So I think it is our goal, as Belinda said, to make sure there's parity across all of these and as quickly as possible. So hopefully what we see over these next few years is that what we have assigned funding wise is adequate or more than adequate. And then I think that you can tell me if I'm wrong here, Belinda, but that as we either get to the next cycle or maybe even before, there can be discussion of how we could expand this out further.
Yeah. And I think along the lines of fiscal control, I think one of the things I think it's important to say in general is that for our team, we had to make some very difficult decisions around how to allocate dollars in a way that for us, the general principle was that we wanted to make sure that what we did, that the decisions we made, right, could help the most people, right, across multiple categories. And I think everyone here knows that there are a lot of different demands that cost money to our bucket. And so our team really went into this trying to figure out equitable ways in which we distribute dollars that were fair to all of our faculty groups, and everyone wants something, right? And so, and every dollar that we allocate to other things, whether it's chair or lab lecture parity or leaves, et cetera, right? The ultimate, if it comes out of ongoing dollars, it impacts salary and retro, or even like the use of one-time dollars, it impacts retro. So for us, it is really about this delicate balancing act and wanting to be responsible. And I think that our group worked really hard to make responsible choices with the dollars that we had available to us. And so I just want to really note that on the front end. And it's, you know, I think you all know, and that it's incredibly stressful for us to have had to make all these decisions, and we didn't take that responsibility lightly. So we just really want to make sure we emphasize that. I thought I saw another hand that seemed to have disappeared.
That was Lauren. She put it down. I think Jason might have answered the question in the chat. Is that right, Lauren?
Yeah, that was correct. I was just wondering. I mean, I had a colleague that was having to deal with critical caretaking stuff, and I was like, I've never used a personal business day ever. Like, can I please give all of them for the last 10 years to this guy so he can handle what he needs to handle with his family?
Right.
So that sucks if we can't do that, but that may also, for a future negotiation, alleviate some of the concern. If you have a part-timer in your department and you want to give them your sick time so they can handle what they need to handle, that could be cool. But I guess that's too expensive to even let us use our own time to give to other people. So
yeah, no,
thank you.
I'm with you on that. And as Jason just put in the chat, we're going to follow up in steering and see if they can, because they can implement that outside of the contract cycle if they want to. I came over to LRCFT from the CSU where we had a leave donation system, and it at least on the donating and receiving side, I can't speak for administration, but it worked great. My wife had to take advantage of it, and we were very thankful it was there. And the great thing is that in terms of what Belinda's been talking about, that actually doesn't cost the faculty bucket any money because people make individual voluntary decisions. So we can try, as Jason said, we can try and follow up with that and see.
Yeah, so I think, and again, I also just want to note, right, that all of these changes were made basically in 8 weeks. Like, this was an intense negotiations. And so there are things on our list that I think logistically may take some time, and we weren't going to be close enough. But as Jason noted, there are certain things that we can contribute to. And then again, when it comes to leaves, the chairs, et cetera, these are all dollars that come out of our bucket. It's not district money coming into the pot here at all. It's not coming out of the reserves or anything, right? So I think those, from a monetary perspective, I think that's really important. And also our team really wanted to make sure that we reserved everything that might be coming in COLA this coming year to be able to apply to salary schedules, because we know that that actually impacts every one of our bargaining unit members. Okay, so federation rights, basically this gives us an additional 0.5 per semester for release times. Folks like myself, or Amit, James, Teresa Aldridge, we have release time to try to help with different representational duties, et cetera. We have a bunch of other folks do this. So this basically means less money out of our coffers, and this does come directly from district and not the bucket. We weren't, as I noted, 8 weeks, very, very intense negotiations. We weren't able to get everything done that we wanted to. So we have 6 different MOUs that we will continue to negotiate on, most likely in the fall, unless we could get it done sooner. Particularly with adjunct faculty paychecks, we really were trying to fight hard to make sure that that your checks were paid in equal amounts per semester, per month in a semester, and that you'd be paid on the first. They're looking into it. Something about their accounting systems. Michael, help me there.
Yeah. They, you know, they said if they can do it, they will. Basically, the concern was exactly what sort of administrative changes and to be honest, technological changes, because as a couple of people have noted in the chat on other issues, the district is not exactly on the bleeding edge of technology when it comes to its, you know, its systems. And so it might be a lot of work or very difficult to sort of shift that in line with the full-time faculty paychecks. So this MOU requires the district to look into that and present a report to the union by the end of this year, telling us if they can do it and what the timeline would be or what the impediments would be.
Great. Also, as most of you know, one of the important wins that occurred before the contract cycle, which actually also helps bring money back into our bucket so that we could also further support additional dollars into the pockets of our part-timers, is we want a big statewide campaign around part-time faculty healthcare, in which part-time faculty are eligible for health insurance at the same cost as what full-timers pay at the 0.4 level. So if you have a 0.4 assignment and you're eligible, you can pay the same as we do, which for me, I'm on Sutter. I pay $67.50 a month for my health insurance, and that would actually be the same cost if I had dependents. But for Kaiser, we all know it's significantly more than that. I think it's 350, give or take. But one of the right now, you essentially have to work for the district for about a year to be eligible. Some of our counterparts across the state have immediate healthcare eligibility, just like full-timers do. You start the job and you have eligibility. We are fighting for that. We would like to have that in place, but we also, from a timeline perspective, we have to wait with the and align with the insurance review committee, which so that we can make sure there's no unintended costs on the other bargaining units, because all of our insurance plans are all tied together across all of our employee areas. So we are hoping that by December we'll have some updates about whether or not we can make it such that adjunct faculty are immediately eligible for the current healthcare benefits. But you are eligible for those who aren't already on our healthcare system. We're also part of a multi-district reimbursement program, where if you're working in another district that also has the same program, you can be reimbursed for proportional cost. And also, we also have a prorated rate if you're between 0.3 and 0.4. But we're going to do some education around that in August, so look out for that. We also know that there's a lot of work that coaches do in terms of post-semester coaching that ends up being required, that's uncompensated. We also know that under the current stipends, it doesn't matter if you are the coach of a, let's say, football team with 100 players or a cross-country team with 7, you get paid the same stipend. So there's a lot of sort of things that we need to investigate around athletic coach stipends, and we intend to have those conversations with the district. We are also looking at office time for full-time counselors working in overload, like currently under the contract. If you're a counselor, you can be working your overload and have to do all student contact time and have no office time. And that office time is time for you to prep. Prison ed program, we actually currently have an MOU in place that we didn't have time to assess and update and see if the stipends are correct, if the protections that we put in place are the safety protocols being followed by both sides, et cetera. So we will be doing that in the fall. And then lab lecture parity, we need to convene a larger group here that will include our Senate partners to, number one, talk about the different types of lab, the work associated with different types of lab, but also come up with a fiscal plan that if we have to reorganize those labs, right, in such a way, how do we go about reaching parity in terms of lab lecture parity. So those are the sort of key provisions of what we've negotiated. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here and see if there's other questions for from folks that I can answer.
Belinda, I've received a couple of messages in the chat, just going back to the very beginning, to your discussion about changes to salary. A couple of people have sort of asked basically how do we vote to ratify a contract where we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the salary schedules? Can you maybe just expand on that a little bit, how that decision will be made relative to the COLA and the budget and things like that?
So unlike other districts, et cetera, where their salary is included as part of the overall negotiations, for us, we actually, it's external, right? And so we make those decisions in July outside of this. And so it automatically gets negotiated in. So for example, we can look up or down the street here, Yuba, et cetera, that in their main negotiations, they have to fight, like, is the COLA going to be 2%? Is it going to be 12%? For those of you at City College at Hartnell, where our former president is now, their administration is offering 0% COLA, and it's all embedded in the current contract negotiations. For us, because we already have money in our bucket, our board makes the decision to apply the COLA. So it's not part of the CBA. It's separate from that. The only one part of it for us is literally just the additional $250 that we've agreed to use right away. But every summer, we do this for you every summer. And it's why for those of you who've been in the district a long time, you know that every summer we come back with a report of that we've negotiated the use of whatever the COLA dollars, and it'll hit all of the salary schedules equally. So that particular item is separate, unlike other districts. Craig. Craig, are you?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we're good.
Yeah, and I apologize for this question because I was in another meeting. I was trying to kind of listen to both. But in regards to student questionnaires or student reviews, I know it's going digital. That's what I saw. But are the questions still the same? Or we've been talking about this for decades. Like the questions we ask on that thing are antiquated at best. Was there any discussion on getting a better student review package?
I think it was passive conversation, and we agree it's antiquated. But at this point, the discussion was that, as far as we got on that discussion, is even if your on-ground class is going to be reviewed online, it's going to be using that on-ground survey, but just in a digital format. But I think that is something that probably has to be reviewed by a larger group of people. And yes, they are going to be they will continue to be the same antiquated questions that we currently get.
I mean, because if sorry, Michael, but like some of the questions they're like, how could you do better? And they're like, I don't know, show up. Like in the end, a lot of those questions don't do anything for us as faculty. And Michael, this is for you. Like, we should figure something next negotiation. We should do something with that because it's no good.
Yeah, well, and to be honest, that's something that could be done outside the negotiation cycle. And in fact, it's something I think that should be could and should be weighed in on heavily by the academic senate, right? Because these questions relate to the work that you folks do as faculty, and it has to do with the sort of the 10+1 sort of purview of Senate. That doesn't mean district and the union don't get to weigh in here, but I'm actually not sure it would have been appropriate for us to negotiate the details of a student review form in negotiations without feedback from the Senate and a wider variety of faculty. I agree with you about the questions, absolutely, but this didn't seem like the place to do it.
Other questions, concerns?
In the chat, Rick has a question asking, is it true that the state pays the district the same for Lab Wish as it does for Lecture Wish?
I would need to check in on that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not the case, but I'm not 100% sure either. I'll look into it, okay? But Robert is pretty sure that that's not the case as well. Yeah.
The other thing that we have to look out for, kind of similar to the non-credit question, is that there may be call outs for particular types of classes that are paid at one rate and other classes that are not. So we'll look into that question as well. So for example, under non-credit, there's enhanced non-credit, which is a specific set of classes that get paid at a higher rate, and then the others are much lower. So we'll look into that, just because there might be a lot of nuance, and it may not just be a straight across the board answer as well. Anything else? We get
A question
Lori?
from Lori.
Hi, I have a question. Thank you, everybody, for your help and working so hard on this contract. I understand that it was a very short amount of time to do a lot of work, so we appreciate everything you did on that. I just have one question regarding the paid catastrophic leave. I think maybe I'm misinterpreting some of it. I know we added the family caregiving component to this, but is the paid catastrophic leave, does that provide 30 days of 100% pay, or is that only the 5-month law benefit?
Oh, I'm gonna have to defer to Jason or Michael on that one. I wasn't.
That's full pay. That's full pay of the 30 days.
Okay, so for both cases, for yourself and for caring for a family member, if you tap into this paid catastrophic leave, you would get that minimum, those 4 days of 100% pay. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I was interpreting that correctly. Thank you very much.
I think, Lori, you're also pointing out to an important thing that we do know that because of the advocacy of the Family Justice Work Group, is that they've actually hired a technical writer to help us rewrite all the language around all these leaves. So hopefully, and I'm putting in quotes, hopefully it's more understandable, but know that we might be tapping on the shoulders of some folks to help us make sure that it actually makes sense in practice, because we, not just us, but Trustee Ortiz and Trustee Wilkerson were very clear, right, that something needed to be done, and they've tasked the district. And I think that's largely because of the work of your group. So I just
Yes.
want to also say that that's one of those wins that doesn't come up in a contract, but comes from the advocacy that you did at the board.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm really happy to hear that. And I think that's going to be really important. And I see Sarah Lehman agrees with me, because it is very hard to interpret. Even as I'm rereading the contract literally right now, I'm like, wait, did I get that right? So we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Belinda, can I just ask, because I was in the chat and it didn't quite, did you mention in your discussion of catastrophic leave the committee that makes up part of that that process?
No, I didn't. Do you want to go ahead and highlight that, or you or Jason?
Sure. So catastrophic leave, to take catastrophic leave, you'll have to put in an application, and the changes we've made to the contract actually have created a catastrophic leave committee that will evaluate those applications in order to sort of make sure that catastrophic leave is going to people who need it. There's 3 people on the committee, 2 of whom are placed there by the president, by Jason, president of the LRCFT. So the majority of the voting committee is union membership. So, but the district wanted some sort of mechanism in place to have applications and evaluations of those applications for catastrophic leave.
Great. And I also just wanted to point out one thing too about the part-timers being excluded from this in the contract. It doesn't specifically say that part-timers are not included in catastrophic leave. And so that's interesting that they interpreted it that way. It just says, you know, the program provides faculty, but it doesn't specify either way who or what type of faculty. And so that's interesting that they would assume that the word faculty wouldn't include part-timers. That's just
we'll need to clarify that. That's a great catch. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the contract there, it does state regular faculty.
Does it? I
guess in 913,
Yeah.
if you look at 913,
yeah, that's where I'm looking.
it'll, once you get into the cat leave area, 913, it will say regular or permanent or something like that. It uses one of those words that
Okay,
basically means full-timer.
got it. Okay.
Thanks, Chris. And Chris was one of our representatives on that team, so I appreciate the fill in there, Chris.
Yeah, maybe I have an old copy because mine just says faculty, but
Well, and
thank you.
sometimes, and just so you know, I mean, obviously with any contract, it may say faculty at the top, and then you get into details, and all of a sudden it says regular or, and which is an ed code term, not ours. I just want to be very kind of clear. But, you know, and then sometimes we realize that, you know, it gets stated one way and then you get into the details and then you see the, for lack of a better way, the nuance or the caveat that it's only for particular groups.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Any last questions? I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording in case folks have questions they don't want recorded.